All right, I would like to welcome everyone today to our webinar around how to reduce barriers to clinician satisfaction with Cerner. We are honored today as we have our senior team, both from Goliath and Cerner, here to discuss with all of you the value that our partnership provides to health systems like yourselves. First, we are joined at Goliath here with our CEO, Thomas Charlton, who not only has decades of experience bringing software solutions to the healthcare industry, but has been working intimately with health systems here at Goliath, helping to transform their health IT teams from reactive to proactive. He's going to be joined with our very own Yemi Ladyju, who's our senior technical consultant and will be providing demos throughout today's event. And finally, we are joined with Chris Vernaci, who is VP and partner at Cerner. Chris has been at Cerner for 12 years now, and throughout that time has had a variety of roles from implementation to client relationships. And regardless of role, Chris has always been relentlessly focused on improving the provider experience and overall client satisfaction. So with that, I want to jump into one more house cleaning slide, just so everyone can set expectations for today. As I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit more about the challenges that health IT faces, what we see here at Goliath, and what Chris has seen working with clients throughout Cerner. We're then going to jump into some real live troubleshooting scenarios and talk through client pains that they had really resolving issues like Cerner is slow, third-party applications crashing, peripheral devices not connecting correctly into Cerner. And we're going to identify how these organizations were able to identify and isolate root cause to deliver permanent fixtures in place. And we're going to do that demoing the software. All of this will take about 30 to 45 minutes. We are going to leave time for Q&A at the end, so please submit questions throughout the presentation today, and we'll make sure we get to them. And also at the end of our presentation, we're going to have a simple 3-question questionnaire, and it's going to talk about the information that was provided and if it met the mark and your expectations. We take this feedback very important here at Goliath because we only want to deliver high-quality content. So it'll take less than a minute to complete, so please take your time and fill that out. And finally, you will receive a copy of this webinar recorded in the next 24 hours. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Thomas, and why don't you get us started on today's webinar?
Sure. Thank you, Stacy. This is Thomas Charlton. Pleasure to be here today. When we talk about, and I'll go through just a couple of slides to give some context about Goliath Technologies. And when we talk about understanding the challenges that are unique to healthcare, I think at Goliath Technologies, we really strive to do that both in our approach as well as our technology. And we start with an understanding of the challenges that health IT has. And certainly there are a number of them in a highly regulated industry such as healthcare. But from an IT perspective, the overarching consideration that we take we spend a lot of time looking at is the fact that a health IT organization has to support a number of users. And let's take example of a health IT organization supporting 10,000 users. A enterprise counterpart or enterprise organization, IT organization, would have double the people and double the budget to support the same number of users. So in health IT, we really have to do more with less. Add to that fact that patient care is at stake when we talk about end user experience, because many of the end users are clinicians serving patients. And then finally, in the quest to deliver a great end user experience, organizations have to manage over 20 vendors to deliver a good Citrix or VMware Horizon end user experience. So what we do to help health IT meet those challenges is that we take a product that has a tremendous amount of embedded intelligence and automation, and we actually have created a technology that's like adding a full-time employee to your staff that's dedicated to troubleshooting. We help enable proactive IT. So our technology has built-in intelligence to interrogate your environment, look for events, conditions, and failure points that can possibly cause end user experience clinician issues. And we bring to the healthcare environment purpose-built EMR, EHR modules, of which Cerner is one. So we're able to bring into a single console any of the data and information you'll need to troubleshoot end user experience issues. And that's what we'll talk about a bit today. And sort of that proactive focus that we have, and the focus we have in delivering solutions to health IT, has given us the ability to add over 400 health systems that utilize Cerner. And I think it's important to note that when you look at a slide like this, we have some of the largest health systems in the United States, as well as community hospitals. So our product is both scalable to large organizations, as well as has a ease of use and price profile to give us the ability to be used at even community hospitals. So Chris, why don't I turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the perception versus reality that exists in the Cerner healthcare marketplace.
Sure. Thanks, Thomas. You know, and what I would just say on the previous slide is the adoption of Goliath and how quickly it has grown and spread across our Cerner client base, to me, speaks volumes to the value that our clients have seen from Goliath. And so this picture here is a great depiction of what the perception is. I always say one of the most convenient offerings Cerner provides to our clients is typically our RHO service. Now, while I wish the reality of this picture were true, it's actually not. You know, so to the end users, the perception is that they have a direct connection to our data warehouse. And if there is an issue, if Cerner is slow, I have a performance issue, I'm getting kicked off the system. Because of this direct connection, surely there's something wrong with Cerner when Cerner is slow. And you know, many of us know here, unfortunately, that's just not the reality. The reality looks more like this for a typical organization. You know, as technology has evolved, the infrastructure required to support the needs of a hospital have grown significantly. So in between the end user and Cerner, there's a lot of middleware, there are devices, you have users on the same network chewing up capacity, bandwidth capacity to go do other things. Hopefully that's not involving streaming Netflix, but all of these things contribute to the overall end user experience. And, you know, unfortunately, what we've learned over time is within the four walls of a hospital, the things that cause performance issues are a complete blind spot, not just to Cerner clients, really the entire industry. And I think if you go look at, you know, other Goliath clients, it's outside of healthcare. And so this has been a blind spot for us. And frankly, we've been riddled with, you know, end user inefficiencies that we don't have evidence to go support. And at the end of the day, it's not a result of the service that Cerner has been providing.
And Chris, I think that's a good point. And when you look at this slide in particular, you can see that this is a complex issue, right? And an issue that is this complex, where patients are relying on these systems to function in an optimal way, does require purpose-built software. I mean, it's a complex enough set of requirements, as well as vendors, that if you don't have something purpose-built, there are going to be gaps in visibility that can translate into issues with delivering care.
Right. You know, and as Stacy said, what I wake up every day and think about, you know, my sole focus is the provider experience, so that the provider can provide better patient care. We have a phrase at Cerner that healthcare is personal, so it's personal to all of us. And at the end of the day, there are these types of issues that lend to a poor provider experience, sometimes impacting patient care, and we take that very personally. So because of the perception versus reality issue that we just highlighted, here's kind of the impact of things. When we don't have visibility into the true root cause of a problem, everything looks like a solution, but nothing is actually a solution. You have poor communication between IT teams, missing data, and analytics. All of these things lead to, what we deal with day in and day out is a finger pointing and blame game. There's a lack of accountability because we don't know who to hold accountable. So it's everyone's fault and nobody's fault. So the blame game is ultimately what we're trying to solve here. We're trying to provide data that allows us to focus on the right problem. And what I can say is I've got a number of clients that are leveraging Goliath. I have a number of clients that have not yet adopted Goliath. And where we have Goliath live, I can say with confidence I have not been blamed for an issue that's not really a Cerner issue. And that's not a defensive statement. That's a statement that says when there's an issue, we're actually focused on solving the right problem. If it's not a Cerner accountable issue, that's also not to say that Cerner doesn't engage. We absolutely engage regardless of whose fault it is. I would just rather engage on solving the right problem versus spending time, spinning our wheels on the wrong thing.
Chris, you bring up a good point. The other point here is too, how do you baseline what good performance is? And what we hear from a lot of our clients, which are also your clients, is how do we, if we're relying only on end user feedback to try to determine what is good performance, then it's probably not the most scientific way of going about it, right? So what Goliath gives you the ability to do is to understand very objectively what the end user is experiencing on a daily basis at any particular given time with any aspect of the application, so that you can determine with very, very objectively and with evidence through analytics and reports what end users are experiencing. Because as you said, it's very personal healthcare. It's also very emotional. And so what Goliath can give you the ability to do is be really have an objective arbiter of whether or not end user experience is at acceptable levels.
Yep, that's right. So maybe we'll jump into a real world example. So this is a client that is an actual current client of Cerner, current client of Goliath, and I would also say is the client that introduced us to Goliath several years ago. But it's a large health system, geographically distributed across the entire United States, 27 acute care hospitals. Around each of those hospitals, as you would expect, they've got a number of ambulatory outpatient clinics as well. Fortune 500 company, so that means that they are publicly traded, and their goal is to stay out of the news as much as possible. So I show this example because when there is a performance issue, we're not talking about impacting care within one facility. We're talking about potential impacts to patient care and patient safety across the entire United States. So I like this example because this shows the inherent value at scale that we have seen leveraging Goliath within some of our large clients. So a couple of examples that we can jump into of where we have leveraged Goliath. We've got three examples. The first one, I love this one. We hear this, Cerner is slow. I like to say the diagnosis of Cerner is slow. It's like taking your car to the mechanic and showing up and saying, I'm having an engine problem. You open the hood, there are 1,000 components within that engine. So showing up and saying engine trouble is like saying Cerner is slow. So we hear this, we've heard this with clients. This specific issue, we had slowness reported across an entire market, a lot of clinicians, a lot of patients that are at stake. They were being kicked off of the application, they were being disconnected, they couldn't reconnect. And so here's an actual place where we leverage the capabilities within Goliath to quickly identify the root cause of the slowness. So with that, maybe I'll turn it over to Yemi to show how Goliath operates.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I remember with this specific example, they were having issues with a particular region or a number of hospitals within the Nevada region, and they couldn't quite understand what was causing the issues. Now, when you take a look at this example, you have different teams with different tools all saying that our part of the tech or our part of the entire environment looks good. So it was with this where there's finger pointing and not really having the visibility to see what exactly was causing the issues, that they took a look at the Goliath solution. Here's where they were able to take a look at individual sessions that were affected, and they were able to isolate the issue down to a particular device that actually was causing the problems and affecting those regions or those hospitals in that region. So they were able to completely rule out Cerner as being the root cause of the issue and focus on solving that particular issue. In this case, it was just to remove that device, and that actually solved the problem. So with that, let's actually jump into the technology and show you exactly how they were able to do that, leveraging the Goliath solution. So when these sort of issues come up, the first place that our customers tend to go to is this screen, which is the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Session Display. And depending on how actually this is deployed, depending on the environment, this is where all of the sessions will show up. You would see all of those Cerner RHO sessions. This works the same way for a client-hosted environment, as well as those environments that have on-premises VDI that they're using to access Cerner, so almost like a double hop configuration. And here's where you'll see all the sessions. In this particular customer's case, they were able to isolate those sessions that were experiencing issues. They found those user sessions, and you can obviously sort or filter based on any one of these categories here. And once they've isolated those sessions, what they then did was they clicked on those sessions, and they got a pop-up of about 7 tabs giving them all the information they needed to troubleshoot any issue inside of this particular session. And actually, the screen that we're looking at here, the summary tab, is where they were able to use it, where they were able to come up with the objective evidence to actually point to the root cause of this issue. Now, the summary tab pulls in together some key data points to help you either come up with quick answers or directs you to where those quick answers are. And they focus here on this key performance metrics section. This is used heavily to be able to understand what's causing in-session performance issues. So slowness, lagging, freezing, disconnects, things of that nature. So for all of those affected sessions, what the IT team did was come over here to the key performance metrics section, take a look at round trip time. They're able to expand that and see, it will confirm if this user is actually having a poor session or not. They were able to confirm, all right, it looks like round trip time was really high for all of these users from these particular hospitals. But then they wanted to understand what's actually causing that high round trip time or poor performance. Then they were able to take a look at this metric here, network latency. This is real-time network latency that we're collecting from the ICA protocol itself. So from the client's endpoint all the way to Cerner RHO, is network performance actually bottlenecking the performance of this user session? From this, they were able to identify, all right, it looks like all of these users have high round trip times because they're having high network latency. Well, where are these users connecting in from, right? But so they were able to sort of isolate down to those users, but take it a little bit further with this next metric here, connection speed. This is the amount of bandwidth available for Citrix receiver at the user's endpoint. So all these users connecting in from these hospitals in the Nevada area were having poor connection speed, and this is the objective evidence that they took over to the network teams at that area. I want to point out that we do not average or roll up any information we collect in our technology. We also give you the ability to keep data historically. It was with this that they were able to go back to historic sessions and saw that connection speed was pretty good up until a particular day. And then they went over to the network team and said, what happened at this day, let's say Thursday at 2 p.m., that started causing these issues for all of these users? Turns out there was a device that was added to the rotation. It was misconfigured. And as soon as they removed that device from the rotation, all of these issues were normalized, and they were able to confirm in real time that these issues were solved. So that's exactly how this particular customer was able to, in a couple clicks, find exactly what was causing the issues for not just one user, but multiple users from multiple different locations. With that, I'll pass it over to Chris to talk about the next scenario.
Well, and I'll stick on this one just for a little bit. I love this scenario because it is so common. Cerner is slow. It's so generic and ambiguous. In this particular scenario, it's an area where from our RHO facility to the hospital, the service was intact. The performance is what we expect. We run all the tools and diagnostics on our side, and we don't see an issue. So then that tells us it's something within the four walls of a hospital, which again, that's what has been our blind spot, everyone's blind spot, without having a true end-to-end monitor like Goliath. The other thing I would point out is in this specific scenario, users were reporting the issue, but it's also good to know, the Goliath is more than just a reactive tool. It's almost a proactive surveillance. So there's some alerting that can happen where slowness can be reported automatically without end users having to pick up the phone and call. So sometimes we are still going to have users that report things, and we can drill down into the data, better understand what the issue is. But it's also interesting to point out that proactively, this will, Goliath can send an alert to the IT staff to say, warning, you have a problem, even before a provider or a clinician has picked up the phone and called. So the next scenario that we hear fairly often, within Cerner, there are a number of third-party applications that either run inside of Millennium or alongside of Millennium. And there are times when, updates are made to that third-party application. And I kind of think of this like a drug-to-drug allergy interaction. So, sometimes a patient doesn't have an issue with, drug A or drug B, but taken together, there's a negative result. And sometimes that's what happens with third-party applications. And it's not always clear which application does the issue reside within. Is it actually PowerChart that is slow and crashing, or is it the third-party voice dictation service that's running within PowerChart that's causing the issue? So this is another example where we had an issue caused by a third-party application. And as you can imagine, if we couldn't drill down and understand what it was that was causing the performance issue, we spend a lot of time trying to solve the wrong problems. So maybe, Yemi, I'll pass it back over to you, and you could demonstrate how exactly does Goliath show the third-party application issues.
Absolutely. And this was another one that was a little bit tricky, especially because you have not only Cerner involved in the hospital, but you also have another third-party application, and their tools all say that there's no issues at all. So what they were able to do at this particular location was, again, go through the process of isolating those users or isolating those user sessions. And again, they get a pop-up of all the information that actually contributes to that session. And then they were able to drill into specific portions. So in this case, they flipped over here to the alerts and logs section. Now, this isn't the prettiest section, but this has detailed information about the performance of the entire system, all the components that actually contribute to this particular user session. So in the alert section, here's where any of the out-of-the-box alerts that Goliath provides to the environment, the embedded intelligence, all of those alerts will populate here. But in this case, they flipped over here to the event log section. Here is where they were able to identify every single application or system error or warning event taking place for all of the users that are on this particular machine. And what they found, just by sorting based on application, is that they were having some application crashes every single time a user tried to use PowerChart. And it wasn't the PowerChart application that was failing. It turned out it was actually the nuanced Dragon Dictation application that was failing for all of those sessions. It was this information with the error messages that they took over to Nuance and had them focus on solving it. So it really enabled the collaboration between the different teams and the different vendors that were all sort of impacting this session to be able to point to, okay, hey, this is actually the problem. This is actually what they're dealing with. So we can focus on fixing that instead of looking at different tools and pointing at individuals that have nothing to do with the actual problem.
Yeah, and when I see this screen, the phrase "needle in a haystack" pops into my head because, without the data, a lot of times resolving these issues, it is like searching for a needle in a haystack. And unfortunately, in the world of healthcare, we're on the clock. While we are searching through the haystack to find a needle. There are patients' lives potentially at stake. And again, our mission at Cerner is not just to provide technology applications to clients. Our overall arching mission is to improve the lives of communities and patients. So spending unnecessary time searching through the haystack to find a needle is not what we want to do. So that's personally why I've always been so interested in Goliath. It's not one of those flashy applications that's going to go make headlines and providers are going to go, aha, I finally have the EMR that reads my mind. This is a behind-the-scenes application that at the end of the day helps resolve critical issues quickly so that we don't have patients' lives at stake.
And so the third, Chris, I can take this one. This was one where there were a tremendous number of physician complaints as well as nurses. And they had sort of an idea that a tipping point was being reached in terms of the number of support tickets that were being opened, but they really had no idea where the issues actually might be. And a lot of the different indicators that they used to manage the internal IT at the health system, this was a Cerner health system as well, seemed to indicate that everything was fine, that all of the applications were fine, all the on-premise systems were fine, Wi-Fi was fine, as well as the basic IT elements. And that's when they called us and we deployed our technology. And Yemi, why don't you run through this particular scenario as well?
Yeah, and this was one that was very particular. Here's a complex environment similar to what we showed in that slide deck earlier, where there is a proverbial double hop, right? There is an on-premises VDI or desktop infrastructure, and which is being published to the users, and from that desktop, they then access Cerner. So there's two Citrix sessions being created here, and their issue was they're having problems with some peripheral devices, things like scanners, Twain scanners, or e-signature pads not working inside of the sessions. And it wasn't that it just didn't work at all. It was very inconsistent. So users would have the ability to see this stuff or to use these components or devices and then log out, log back in, and not have that ability anymore. And this was something that was really causing some tension, because you have the on-premises team saying, well, it doesn't look like there's any issues on our side. And then you have Cerner in their state-of-the-art sort of data center and all of their tools saying there's nothing that sort of presents as being the root cause of the issues on our side. So our technology was really brought in to have sort of these collaborative conversations to be able to get to where actually the root cause of these issues are. So in the same way, the health system went through in those two examples before, this particular health system was able to open up those sessions that were impacted by these issues, and then they flipped over to a different portion of the technology. So we saw the summary tab and the alerts tab. Here, they took a look at the ICA HDX channel tab. And I know we talked about ICA, network latency, round trip time, and also connection speed in another example. But here they focused on the ICA channel usage. Now, it might seem counterintuitive, but the only way to get this sort of information, which is the available bandwidth that is being used per the different channels inside of the ICA protocol for a user session, the only way to get this information is by deploying technology into Cerner RHO. This really allows the ICA protocol to go through and check all of these different pieces, and we just collect that information and present it to the user. So in this particular case, what they found was for all of those Cerner sessions that are being affected, there was actually no input bandwidth for printer or scanner or even their USB bandwidth. And you can see here all of the available channels that we're able to pick up here right on the screen. So what Cerner was able to identify is that, okay, it doesn't look like we're getting any input bandwidth. So it does not look like it's a Cerner side. However, on the VDI side, they were getting, they were also not getting any input bandwidth at all. So that told the IT team that it looks like that there was some sort of issue with USB drive redirection in the on-premises environment, because if the on-premises environment does not get any input bandwidth for the peripheral devices, then there's no way that within that VDI session that Cerner could get those, or those Cerner sessions or the application sessions could get those ability to access those resources as well. What this did was enable collaboration. They were able to then focus on the on-premises VDI environment, and they were able to use Goliath to be able to pinpoint those and solve them. And really the overall value proposition here is the ability to have collaborative conversations. Collaborative conversations with whether the vendors, the on-premises team. We work with a lot of IT works hospitals as well, which then means that Cerner is also leveraging this technology to troubleshoot not only the on-premises issues, but issues within the application as well.
Yeah, and another interesting thing I would point out around this scenario, if we could jump back to the slide, is that the ability to drill into individual end user sessions. So again, kind of role playing how these things go. Many times when an end user reports an issue, we frequently are asking, could you send us a screenshot of the error that you received? And 9 times out of 10, the physician wasn't, or the nurse wasn't trying to capture a screenshot, didn't think about it. And so we don't have the screenshot of the actual error. We get like a paraphrased message of what the error was. So then we hop into what we call a smart auditor session. So now we physically have people watching live video to see if the provider can recreate the issue. And to jump back to my auto mechanic analogy, many times when they try to recreate the issue, you show up at the auto mechanic and the check engine light magically that day didn't turn on. So it's very frustrating. We waste valuable provider time trying to recreate issues if they weren't able to capture a screenshot up front. And so, this is interesting because what Goliath will provide is not just the hard data, but in some cases, Goliath is providing screenshots proactively of the logon experience. And so if there's a process within the logon experience that breaks down, we're not relying on a provider to send a screenshot. We're not relying on a provider to recreate it while we look over their shoulder. It's actually captured up front. So to me, this is, again, just another area that saves a lot of valuable time in the troubleshooting process.
Absolutely. I think that's a good point, and it's a good segue into the next slide here, which is enabling those sort of data-driven conversations for collaboration. And another way that people are able to do that while leveraging our technology is through the historical reports and analytics, right? So here are a number of reports that I think are being leveraged on a daily basis by a number of our different health systems. Here's one that focuses on license usage. This is typically used by sort of the on-prem VDI or Citrix infrastructure team, just to be able to understand what licensing looks like and how they could support many users, especially when you're talking about delivering EHR applications. The next one, customers have told us has been very helpful in collaborating with Cerner, because this breaks down the log-on times and it breaks down the different stages of the log-on time. So as issues start to come up, or as different sections of the log-on process start to increase, this just enables the Cerner to collaborate with the on-prem team to understand, okay, what needs to change or what has changed that has been sort of driving these delays or things of that nature. And here's another one showing things in a more graphically intensive way, overall session count, and giving IT the ability to understand what they need to do to support users on a regular basis.
So in summary, I think, and we'll move to Q&A in a second here, is to sort of tie off everything we saw today. What Goliath Technologies brings is embedded intelligence and automation, deep and broad metrics and historical reports and analysis, all designed to improve the accessibility and delivery of applications so that users can have seamless access and patient care will not be adversely impacted because of inability to utilize Cerner applications, as well as any other business or clinical applications delivered using Citrix or VMware Horizon.
Well, great. Thank you, Thomas, Yemi, and Chris. We have a number of questions that are coming through, and so I recommend if anyone has any additional questions, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them. So first question that's come in is for you, Chris. If you could comment on the overall impact your clients have had on deploying Goliath. I think you made a few comments there throughout, but maybe summarize.
Yeah, I think I touched on it just a little bit, but maybe to kind of circle back and be more specific. The other catchphrase I use commonly with Goliath is, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And so, I mean, really what that's saying is Goliath is another tool in the tool belt so that not everything looks like a nail when we're trying to solve a problem. And again, it's not meant to be a defensive comment. It's meant to kind of display how we are more efficiently solving end user issues. Is that after deploying Goliath, I never see Cerner get blamed for incidents that are not directly caused by Cerner. Again, many times we still are heavily engaged on the resolution of those issues, but we have the data so that we're focused on the right component of the engine to solve the problem. So again, I do not want that to come across as a defensive statement. We absolutely want to be accountable where we should be accountable, but more importantly, we want to focus efforts on solving problems faster and making sure that what we are delivering to our end users is a high availability system that's reducing friction and ultimately helping them provide better care. And we're able to do that if we can solve technical glitches a heck of a lot faster.
Great, thank you. Next question is, who paid for Goliath?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, no pun intended. The who pays for Goliath, I think it also stems into who are the end users of Goliath. And so across our clients, we have a couple of different scenarios. Ultimately, the end user of Goliath is typically going to be an on-premise support team, or maybe in the case of a large health system, you might have a remote support team kind of monitoring and looking over the shoulder of the on-premise IT staff. So in some cases, that on-premise IT staff might be directly employed by the hospital or health system. In other cases, that on-premise IT staff could be outsourced to a third party. So the who pays for it really kind of depends on who's going to be the users of Goliath, and ultimately benefits from more efficiently solving problems that could be a reduction in FTE time spent on resolving issues. So the who pays for it kind of varies client to client, just based on how the IT staff is set up and structured.
And I would add to that in the many conversations when we're working with Cerner clients that end up purchasing Goliath, in the large majority of cases, it's the health system that's purchasing Goliath. Certainly, if it's an IT Works hospital, it's Cerner and the health system purchasing Goliath because they manage the IT infrastructure on premise. And the reason, the rationale for that I've heard is that Cerner is responsible for the application within the four walls of the data center. And outside at the edge of that data center, their sort of responsibility for end user experience ends, and it really picks up with the health system. So the health system has to be accountable for being able to manage and monitor the end user experience on premise at the health system location. And that's sort of where the delineation seems to come down when we're dealing with clients that end up acquiring Goliath technologies.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question that's come in is there a minimum version of HNAM that Goliath can be used for? And I went and looked it up. Chris may know. It's the Health Network Architect Millennium for Cerner. And then the other question in that, because it was two parts, is how does Goliath work with Cerner's CoPath? So let me know if you guys need me to repeat those.
Yeah, so I think I understand that question. Maybe to say it back so I'm answering the question correctly. I think I understand that to be, which version. So it's probably is there a specific code level requirement that Cerner or Goliath requires for it to run? And the answer to that is no. Really what is required from our standpoint and the Goliath standpoint is it's just any application that's accessed via Citrix. So regardless of code level that you're on from Cerner, you're still accessing it via Citrix. So there's not a minimum level. How does it work specifically with PathNet? It does work, and it's monitoring performance within every single Millennium application. So where you have multiple Millennium applications running, you can see are there performance, end user performance issues with specific applications. So it's not a generic Cerner slow. Within an entire hospital, you could drill down to say all of Cerner is not slow. It's a specific application. It's PathNet. So if we're not seeing anything from the remote hosting side in terms of issues, maybe you've got an issue within a network closet that's feeding your lab facility. So you can drill down just to be application specific, but it works across all apps, monitoring the same performance metrics. Doesn't matter if it's the lab, the ED. So hopefully that fully answers the question.
Perfect. And if not, we'll be happy to follow up after as well. So next one is, where and how are your agents deployed?
Well, from you take that one.
Yeah. From a technology perspective, we are not only agent-based, we're agentless. So we rely on a number of different methodologies for gathering metrics. But in general, we deploy our technology in Cerner RHO as well as on-premise, which gives that end-to-end view that organizations need to be able to have a complete view of the end user experience from the minute they use a device to log on to Cerner, to accessing that Cerner application. Now, when we put our technology into RHO, it's important to note that we're not doing that to monitor anything in RHO. We're doing that because of the way Citrix is architected. And so what our technology is doing when we put it in RHO on a XenApp server is it's integrating with the Cerner APIs and pulling the end user experience metrics through those APIs. So that's a really important thing to note. It's the Citrix architecture that drives the need for our technology to be in RHO. And it seems a bit counterintuitive, but that is the only way you can get true end user experience from the end user's perspective in using the application from the on-premise environment.
Good. I think kind of related to that then, there's another question around how difficult is it to implement?
I'll give my somewhat non-technical response in the sense that, when we're talking about health systems at scale, we're all very used to, if it's a really impactful, valuable piece of software, that must mean it also is really hard and takes a long time to implement. Many times in our implementations, the longest pole in the tent is the end user training and adoption part of the project. So in the case of Goliath, we're not talking about hundreds or thousands of end users that have to be trained and ultimately adopted. We're talking about a relatively small number of people. So from a non-technical perspective, it's relatively easy to go implement.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we mentioned embedded intelligence and automation at the early stages of this webinar. It's important to note that Goliath started as a consulting services company focused on troubleshooting end user experience issues and spent a tremendous amount of time in healthcare. And I think we've added about 10,400 hours or so, roughly 5 years of consulting services projects that we've taken and used all of that knowledge to build a software product. So now consulting services as a percentage of our overall revenues is less than 3%. And really what that means is that our product automatically will be deployed. It automatically discovers the environment, automatically looks for issues and failure points and conditions. So the reliance on human beings to deploy the product is really minimal. So the product is easy to deploy, easy to install, easy to configure, and then it's also easy to use. So the whole notion here is to go into health IT departments that, as we talked about, have a resource constraints that enterprise organizations do not, and give them a technology that has an accretive benefit, almost like adding a full-time employee to their staff. So it's pretty remarkably easy for the size of the organizations we're in. We're talking anywhere from 25,000 to 40,000 users at the higher end. And we're talking about days of implementation, not months. And that's, by the way, man days. It may take a month to implement because of change control processes, security procedures, and things like that. But for an organization like ours, we're talking about man days of our involvement.
Perfect. And we have another question that's come in that's somewhat related to kind of implementation and setup. So you do this one next. This individual says they have VMware Horizon on-premise, which delivers our user Cerner Millennium. Would you work in this setup?
Sure, that's what we call a double hop configuration that Yemi had mentioned. In fact, I think one of the troubleshooting stories was that. So we support both Citrix as well as VMware Horizon from the same console. So in a double hop configuration, which is Citrix is delivering access to Cerner on-premise, and then they're taking Cerner and delivering that using VMware Horizon on a desktop, that can be a very complicated scenario. But since we monitor all of that from the same console, if there is an end user experience issue, we can determine where that issue is outside of the Cerner data center.
Great. And then I think I have one, Chris, this one's probably for you. And how is Goliath different from Lights On?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get that one quite a bit from clients, and frankly, as we're educating our own associates on the differences. So we at Cerner have spent a lot of time developing our Lights On reporting, and I think where it gets confused is we call it client experience or end user experience reporting, but essentially what we're monitoring within Lights On is the time it takes for providers to complete specific workflows, for example. So how long does it take for a provider to complete their documentation? How long does it take for providers to place orders? We're also within Lights On monitoring some standards. Are providers using smart templates? How are they using the system relative to their peers across the country? And so it's really workflow focused, and we have timers that within Millennium that are tracking all of those things. But what Lights On is not doing, because it's the technology, the data is actually coming from the end user on-premise network, is we're not able to monitor the actual system performance from that perspective. So in terms of end user experience, we're looking at workflow and workflow optimization versus Goliath. It's providing more system performance data and optimization metrics.
Thank you, Chris. Next one, probably for you, Thomas, is who is Goliath's largest customer?
On the healthcare side, I can't give the actual name. You saw the slides that we have, but probably from a user perspective, from a hospital perspective, over 140 hospitals in a particular system, and from a user's perspective, about 40,000 users.
Maybe a follow-up then to that one is, who's the typical user of Goliath once it's installed? And then once it's installed, how many people does it take to manage?
So, UHS is a customer of ours. They have 35 acute care hospitals that are using our technology, and it takes a third of an FTE to monitor, so not even a full FTE to monitor all of those facilities and the end user experience using our technology. So that could give you some idea of how little it takes to manage our product. Remember, the goal of Goliath is to be adding a full-time employee that's dedicated to troubleshooting. So remember that we are automatically have the intelligence to look for issues within the environment, and we're bringing those issues to you and showing you that there is an issue, hopefully before an end user is impacted, and then where that issue is in your environment. So this should be an additive thing to your organization and not something that takes manpower to manage and monitor. Specifically in terms of the people that are utilizing it, our technology is used by really 4 different constituencies in an IT department. It's used by the help desk to resolve issues as quickly as they possibly can. It's used by the Citrix team or the server team, whichever they're called in a particular organization, if they have those. The escalation team will use our technology to do deep drill downs and find issues that can't be found during the escalation process. And then management will very often use our technology focused primarily on reports and analytics to try to give an objective measurement of particular aspects of end user experience within a particular environment.
Yeah, and I would add, it's important to point out, the real manpower behind Goliath, it's the on-site IT staff that are already there. And pre-Goliath, they're there a lot of times doing a scavenger hunt around a hospital to go figure out where do they have a technical issue that's impacting end user performance. Going around department by department, testing Wi-Fi, digging around in network closets. So that manual scavenger hunt now just becomes a third of an FTE that is looking at a dashboard that is really directing the traffic and saying, hey, instead of going around the facility looking for Easter eggs, here is specifically where you need to go, and it's this specific device in your network that has an issue.
Great. Another question that just came in, and they said they may have missed this, but I don't think we addressed it, is what is the price range for Goliath?
Well, the price range for Goliath, depends on the size of the environment that you want to deploy Goliath in. So our technology is a la carte. You can purchase as much as you want or as little as you need. Organizations may purchase it for a series of hospitals, not the entire health system, or a particular group of users, or specific functionality. We have a lot of hospitals, health systems. Chris alluded to the snapshotting feature. We have some health systems that will use our technology deployed on premise that will test every 15 minutes, let's say, and log into Citrix and Cerner every 15 minutes to make sure that the applications are up and available, and if not, send in a real-time alert so that somebody can troubleshoot that particular issue. By the way, that's about 1.6 million hours of downtime that little piece of technology is saved, and it costs the total expense is a couple of $100 per month. And keep in mind that you can purchase our technology through Cerner, and Cerner enjoys a very substantial discount over the list price that's available in the marketplace. So that also makes the cost quite affordable.
Yeah, in terms of price, this is I tell my teams, this is certainly not a quota buster type of technology, and the purpose behind this is not to go sell another piece of software. I mean, the goal here is improving end user experience, which reduces some friction, providing better patient care. So this is all about client satisfaction. This is not a big ticket price tag kind of item.
We have two more questions then that have come in. One is, this individual is an IT Works hospital. Do you have any IT Works hospital customers today?
Yes, we do. Westchester Hospital, as well as Children's National, and I believe a few others.
Great. And final question, unless anyone comes in here at the last minute, is does Goliath provide this as a managed service?
We absolutely do. So if you have a light IT staff, like the idea of having Goliath, but don't have the people to manage it, we can certainly support you with a managed service offering as well. So that you're not purchasing software, but rather just a service that is monitoring as a service, if you will.
Well, great. That was quite a bit of slew of questions. So if anyone has any additional questions or you would like to register for a free trial or demo, please email us at techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com. As Thomas shared, Cerner is an authorized reseller of Goliath, so you can reach out to your Cerner representative and they would be happy to provide you specific pricing or more information as well. And final information is there will be that short 3-question survey as you exit the webinar. We would greatly appreciate if you took a minute to fill those questions out so we can continue to deliver in our troubleshooting series like this, the best content that aligns to your needs. Well, thank you, Chris, for joining us, and thank you, Yemi and Thomas, for taking time out of your busy day to provide this information for everyone on the phone today.
Thanks for having me, Stacy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.